All right, we're ready.
Are we on?
Are we on?
Are we on?
Can you hear me?
We're on. You hear me now?
Can you guys hear us?
Yes!
Feeling good?
Feeling good?
I am real upset that we are following Steven.
I know.
That's,
It's a tough act to follow.
You guys are important too.
Yeah.
Come on.
Jeff, what was your favorite line again? Yeah.
yeah.
Remember, we
We should
didn't.
just do that panel over again.
It's okay. It took 10 years before we worked together in person, right?
That's funny. All right. So how's everybody doing?
Woo!
Awesome.
This is great.
So to start off, I'm Jeff Easterling, a writer with 343 Industries for the Halo franchise, and I am joined by some incredible people, folks that I have the utmost blessing and privilege to work with and see on a regular basis, largely because I know how hard they are working for you guys. I've got Roby. Everybody give it up for Roby. Justin Roby, Director of Player Voice. By the way, Director of Player Voice does not mean Director of Master Chief's lines,
No.
which he has
that
been
would be
tweeted
awesome.
several times. We've got Dr. Jessie Thomas. You guys probably know Jessa Birdie from her endless patience on social media with all sorts of questions. And someone who needs no introduction, but we're going to do it anyway because it's in the script, is Brian Gerard's sketch. There we go.
It was the doctor. Was the patient thing with like a pun on doctor? Like, was that intentional?
No,
It just rolls off the tongue.
every pun I make is intentional. They're just not all good. So this is called Power to the People. One of the things that we actually really wanted to talk about was specifically the role that the community and the fans actually play in just the development and the future of the Halo franchise. We can really think of no better way and no better place to kind of talk about that than a celebration like this, where we are literally combining, taking the Halo universe and making it into a tangible thing that you can hang out with your friends and meet up with and talk to folks, on the development team, people who have been involved with the games. That's always something to me that I think is really neat to be able to do, because you know what? We all have opinions. This day and age, everyone has them, and we're even more adept at sharing them. And it doesn't matter what it is.
Something you care about, though, right?
Yes, very, very much. And you know what? If you're not like a Halo fan, and maybe if you're just attending with someone who is, we know you have opinions too, even if it's not about Halo. So it's, how was the last episode of Game of Thrones? Or how was Toy Story 4? How was the burger I had last night? Did I have a burger last night? So,
Did I?
Like, everybody has opinions, and we all like to share them. But what happens to them? Sometimes they just get tossed out into the ether, but other times you have people that are behind the scenes working really, really hard to turn those opinions and that feedback into something that is tangible and awesome that affects you later on. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And I just kind of want to give just a quick pulse of what is it like, just real quick surface, to kind of like work with the Halo community, and what are your general thoughts about the ability to work with them? Roby, we'll start with you.
Well, I mean, as somebody who is actually coming back to the franchise, like my gaming career actually started with testing Halo CE originally, and then I went off and did a bunch of other games, and then coming back, I think in my discussion with Brian when I first came on, Brian was like, hey, I just need you to kind of understand something. Those Age fans were something, but those Halo fans, and I learned how passionate you guys are, like everything from following my journey, going through lore, but yeah, opinions, you have a lot of them. And it's been really cool working with super smart and very talented people about how we take what you guys say and how you guys play and turning that into actionable things, and then getting to partner with the very talented Mr. Sketch over there in terms of like working through and turning that stuff into like just usable real stuff. So that's been my experience so far. I got a lot to learn. Like I said, I'm now jumping full in, but I got more to get through for sure.
Raise your hand if you have an opinion on how Halo should be or go.
I'm sure no one, right?
Yeah.
No,
Good.
And all of you who are not raising your hand are lying. So
Very true. And one of the neat things is literally, as I look, across you guys, it's actually very reminiscent of photos like this one. It's important to remember that the Halo community is made up of lots and lots of, not just lots of people, but lots of different people with all sorts of different, flavors of opinion and favorite things and backgrounds. And Dr. Jesse, I know you're actually in this picture right there.
I am. It's the red hair is the calling card.
Yeah, the beacon right over there near the middle, surrounded by the folks who you love to listen to.
I do.
Yeah, could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when you were kind of going back to that moment that it really hits you. I remember the day when my boss told me that I got to work on Halo. It was a really big moment. This was like almost 4 years ago now.
Oh, wow.
Just because it's such a storied franchise and the stuff that I knew I was going to get into, and the researcher for Halo is going to be the person you're like, oh man, there's so many people and so many different facets of the community that you knew it was going to be a time of like, I really got to invest. Like I got to research and do all of my work and really try to connect with these people who know so much about this franchise. So my favorite part is just being able to, look at all these awesome people that I get to learn from and observe and hear what they have to say.
And Brian, like as the maybe perhaps lovingly, the grizzled ancient of us, you've seen the community change. You've seen the community change and grow. You worked with the community with Bungie. You've worked with the community with 343. Like, how has it changed? What kind of things have changed, and what kind of things just stay the same?
Well, Jeff, back in my day, if you had feedback, you would write a letter and put a stamp on it, and it might make its way to my desk. That's actually pretty true, though, because
it's a legit story.
The biggest change, I think there's more fans now than there were. It's even bigger, obviously. Each game, we've seen it grow. It's awesome. It's more diverse. We've reached new audiences, new types of players and people. But it's changed a lot because the feedback is instantaneous now, and social media really changed everything, right? So you want to know what you thought about that burger, there'll be 45 tweets waiting for you the second you get off the stage, right? So for me to come back to the fold down the road after coming back to 343 and having to kind of readapt to this new landscape and be able to manage a lot more inputs coming at me way faster, it's been exciting, but it's definitely different. And I guess each new game, like we talk about this a lot, there's just so many different niches of players that like different things, and just trying to be mindful of making sure that we're looking out for everyone, and how do we balance that? And I think we're going to talk about that today.
It's true. And in all honesty, speaking of like just how things have changed in regards to how feedback is given, we've had to change, and really the game industry as a whole has had to change and adjust as to how that feedback is taken, which has led us to things like the Halo Insider program. Roby, can you talk a little bit just, on the surface about what that is and what that means?
So I will. I'll be a little bit light, but then all in all, like I said, I came along this journey later on, right as this was kind of coming through. Honestly, I wanted to throw this more to Brian and Jesse because they honestly were part of building this journey, and it didn't just start out here. I think since MCC launch and stuff like that. So Brian, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, Jesse as well. I think everybody's aware. A little over a year ago, the studio kind of embarked on a journey to revisit the Master Chief Collection, and there's no shortage of feedback there. And I think it was time to kind of do something about that feedback. So one of the key components of that was how do we really embrace and partner with the community in more than just lip service. So we originally created something that we were calling the MCC Insider Program, and it allowed people to sign up and have a chance to get work in progress development builds as the team was making them. We'd put them out, people would play them, they would give us the feedback. Jesse and her team would gather that feedback, and that has grown into something even bigger.
Yeah, it's once we went from MCC Insider into Halo Insider, it's really about figuring out how we develop games with the community in step. So you guys are there with us, helping us shape and helping us mold as we go through that. And that's what Halo Insider and flighting is all about, is you actually get to participate in this process that we're going through. It's a different way of doing game development where you guys are on this journey with us. And that takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of planning of kind of going back and forth. But the overall point is that this is something you guys care about. It's a lifestyle for you guys, it's a lifestyle for us. Why don't we communicate, have dialogue, and do that together and see what we can build when we're both working on it.
I think the MCC is a great example of, like, it's no secret that at its inception, it didn't go quite the way that any of us would have. I know, weird. But I think it's impressive, and I'm sure this comes off as biased, but like I think it means a lot, even personally, that it's something that could have just been something that was pushed away and like, oh, that happens, but it's something that was looked at and the work that folks have done all across the studio, including studio leadership, to really want to be like, you know what, let's use this as an awesome example of something going forward. Not just to make stuff like this right, but let's practice at how to do things right over and over again in the future. Because there is no making zero mistakes.
Yeah.
You know, no matter what the game launch, what the product launch is, there are always going to be things that are, you know, hiccups and stuff. But how do we, you know, it's the like teach someone to fish. You know, rather than just trying to put a Band-Aid on one problem, how do we actually use it to lay a foundation of solving potential problems in the future?
And it doesn't always have to be framed as like a mistake either, right? Like sometimes if you want to experiment and you want to try things out, that means testing it. That means putting it out there, seeing what fans like. It doesn't necessarily mean it goes out as a mistake. It might just be an experiment. It might be something we want to try and learn from and see how you want to apply. So it's a different way of kind of thinking about it.
Now, Dr. Jesse, you're using words like experiment.
I can't help it.
The science is pouring out here. So actually, let's talk a little bit about that, because it is one thing to just be like, you know, what's your opinion on a thing? Do you like this game mode or this game mode? Does this make you happy or does this make you sad? But in all honesty, the amount of effort and work that goes into the kind of, you know, questions that are asked, what's the information that you're looking for is pretty crazy, and it really does like start off with some really core questions. You know, like, what are you after? What are you wanting to find out? Can you talk a little bit about specifically the kind of questions that you ask and the methodology behind that?
Yeah, absolutely. So in general, and this is I think a misnomer that gets out there sometimes, is you sometimes hear this myth that like research or feedback or something is kind of destroying the artistic vision, or that we're trying to make everything this like, you know, perfect mechanical thing of numbers and dots to satisfy the game, and that's not true at all. Really, it's about supporting the designers and the developers in their vision and helping them achieve that. And what we do is we ask the right questions to make sure that's landing the way that they wanted it to. And then we check with you guys to see, hey, this is the experience we delivered. Did you get it? And then do you like it? And to get up to that point of do you like it, there are a lot of steps that we have to do kind of along the way. I think we've got an example a little bit later that we can kind of dig into. But overall, it's trying to understand, is this the vision? Are we achieving the vision we set out to do? And do you guys like this? Does this resonate with you? Is this something you want to keep doing? And so yeah, it's a slow process, but a good one.
I think the important thing too, and when we talked about, we showed it a little bit out there about that be honest part, is that a lot of people, and one of the things that I get feedback on when they sign up for programs like the Halo Insider program is they're trying to determine who we want to have be in the game, right? And they'll say stuff like, well, they're only going to want core Halo players, or we're only going to want, you know, core competitive players and stuff like that. It is super important that you're honest when you fill out that stuff, because we need all players, right? Like I think a lot of people have an understanding of what they think a fan is, and honestly, we have a lot of different fans, and so we need all of those individuals, because we ask different questions for different parts of the game that help us do feedback, because everybody plays Halo differently, and not everybody plays the same things in Halo, and we understand that as we look at the data and stuff as we pull through. And so it's extremely important. It's like we're getting these and asking those right questions, that you guys as players are coming in and telling us who you are, so we can make sure that we're talking to the right people about those things.
Yeah.
What's a wrong question? What's the difference between like a right question and a wrong question?
Doctor.
So to me, it's more about asking the right question at the right time. Timing is incredibly important, right? So going back to that example, I can't ask if you like something if you just struggle to understand it, right? So first it's just understanding if this is a thing that you're processing. You know, if I show you a video clip or something and you might have missed the main character walking across, and then I ask you questions like, what'd you think about that main character? And you're like, no idea what you're talking about, lady. Then clearly we got to make sure that we're doing it the right way. And then the other thing is making sure the methodology, I can't even talk.
Whoa, that's a big word.
I promise, I'm a doctor. That it lines up with what you're trying to achieve. And so it's less about asking the right questions and more the timing of when you ask each question.
Brian, before we move on actually to the next thing, one of the then key aspects of all of that is also then communicating all of that stuff out.
Yeah.
And the stuff that these folks might be working on isn't necessarily the language that is best to communicate it out to a wide audience. So like, you talk about us trying to then all work together to communicate it out in ways that everybody understands, including us sometimes.
Yeah, I don't always know what Dr. Jesse's talking about, but that's why she's in the role that she's in and I'm in the role I'm in. Just in general though, you mentioned the communication part. Like, it's super important for us, for all of us, that no matter what we ask, that we owe it back to the players to let them know where that lands, right? So it's not to say we're always going to agree with everybody, but it's the loop is super important, right? So I'd say the community team in particular, a lot of what we have to do is make sure that we are finding a way to make sure players feel like they are in fact being heard, and then what happens with the information that we've gathered between Jesse, Roby, and myself. So I think it would depend, it varies to kind of answer your question. If it's something that's very nuanced, that is in response to the hardcore HCS crowd, it would be a little differently delivered than it would be to someone that wants to play Crossy Road, for example.
How many of you guys, just out of sheer curiosity, follow like one of the Halo social channels and use that to like get info on a regular basis, whether it be like Halo or HCS or Halo Gear? Awesome, that's cool. It's nice to hear, because sometimes we wonder, you know, like, is anyone listening? Is anybody out there?
People are listening, but on that note too, you know, I think as we talk about how do we evolve and become even better at this, like one of the things that the team's investing a lot of time into is how do we do more of that in the game? Because we have players, you got a control in your hand, you're right there. Imagine in a world where we could get real feedback contextually right there, or deliver information to players without making them go
Hold X to tweet.
Yeah, right? So I think as part of that journey and evolution, it's the full circle. How do we tap into the game more as well?
So once we ask those questions, what do we do with all that data, Jesse?
It is a lot of data that comes in.
It's a lot of data.
So first of all, it is definitely a partnership, just like Brian talked about. So a good example of this, sometimes, one version of data, is, let's say we're developing a new weapon. So up here we've just got an example of a shotgun that's coming up. In order to get through that and to get all that data, I've got to collect these little pieces. So the first thing is just showing a picture and understanding, like, what is this? Do you guys know what this is? And getting that perception stuff. Then you have to make sure that they have time to play with it, make sure it's usable. Can you actually fire it the way you're supposed to? Then you get more playtime with it and trying out different maps and different rooms to see how that goes. Okay, cool, we've checked that off. Now we're going to get into, is it fun? Do you like using this weapon? Does it work well? Cool. Then Brian, for instance, might find something, some beats or some pulses out that are saying, hey, this isn't really landing perfectly in competitive play. There's something off. And so he usually helps me understand, like, oh, there's some vibes out there going on. I might need to dig back into this again. And then it usually helps me spin up a study. We go back in and we start talking to those kind of players, and we revisit a lot of this stuff. We have to go through and check those boxes again. So it really is an ongoing rolling process of communication and data that has to get collected and recollected and double checked. It's a complicated thing. There's a decent team that kind of goes through that. But especially when those voices come from multiple channels simultaneously, you really have to paint this whole picture of, okay, the competitive folks are saying this, the brand new people are saying this, people that are kind of going through that transition and trying it out in the campaign versus multiplayer are saying this, and understand the pattern. And then once we've established that, we can make some changes and talk to the design team. Then it's all about communicating again, closing the loop and saying, all right, we're going to try something new and see how that goes.
I think one of the things that's super interesting, and I don't know, maybe some people grok it, some people don't, but I think it's important to understand how many different channels we honestly have in terms of getting feedback. Because I think a lot of times, and I know Brian probably sees this just a lot, it's like, no, you get all your info from Twitter, or no, you get all your info from, heaven forbid, Reddit. But you know, all in all, like, we really have a lot of ways that we get data. We travel, like, for instance, we travel all over the world, and some people basically followed along with that. Like, we were in over in Amsterdam. We went to Brazil. We go all over the place. We have players play. We talk to them. That's via concept testing. We do stuff like we have what are called subject matter experts, or councils of individuals that we go and choose that we use to help represent small parts of the community as well. On top of Twitter, Reddit, then we have like the Halo Insider programs. We have usability. So there's a lot of different things that we do to make sure that we give your voice the appropriate place. And then it's from, like you said, that complication in terms of getting the data in the right way. But the thing is, like I said, I guess I don't get to talk anymore.
The player voice, director player voice has lost his voice.
Lost his voice.
Well, and actually, I think a good example of that, like Halo 5 is an example of that when we were developing the Forge mode. We actually specifically, the Forge team, specifically, that is a time where you're like, you know what, sometimes we want to go broad with feedback, but sometimes when we're looking at a very specific feature, we want to pinpoint like, hey, here's some power users, here's some folks that we feel like, and that the community feels like really represents some of that, and so they actually got a little bit of a seat at the table for some of how that feature actually evolved and then was manifested in Halo 5. That's a tangible example that you guys hopefully have all played or had some sort of experience with. And I love the group that we have up here because you guys are like the triumvirate of both directions of communication, because it's really interesting when it comes to feedback. It's all about building like empathy and understanding in two directions, because not only do you have the front lines of trying to explain the development process and break that down to the fans, but you actually have that process going back the other way. Because it might be really easy for developers who are kind of locked down and heads down in their stuff to come up for air and see a thread on Reddit and be like, oh God, this is what represents the community. And we know that that's not necessarily the case. So it's also the job to build it back this way and be like, actually, we use all of these different channels to build feedback and kind of paint a picture back up to leadership among teams and leadership really even among the studio. And Roby, I want to talk a little bit about like some of that leadership. Like here's some examples. These are just some of the directors and some of the structure. So this is actually some of the structure for Halo Infinite. So an example would be Chris Lee. So Chris Lee is the studio head for the FPS game. So he's the studio head of Halo Infinite. So he's kind of like the top dog when it comes to those decisions. And then we've got some examples of some of the other directors. Rob, you want to speak to like an example of some of those directors, and then we'll hit your role there.
If you guys can hear me, okay, yeah. So like I said, these are just a smattering, but I think the main thing of showing you guys this is like we have the level below Chris, and I've had conversations with people. It's like, well, where does the player voice basically fit into this? Because that was the big thing that we talked about when they brought me on in terms of changing where the player fits. So there's Chris, and then from there you've got like people like Berger, who's basically in charge of tech. You got Mary, who's our executive producer. But if we just do a click reel here, that's you guys, right? Like you basically have a channel in through Chris, and then I'm helping make sure that your feedback then goes directly from the team. So it adds a lot of emphasis, and it allows us to basically make sure that when Roby comes down, in some regards, it's like, oh, okay, there's something that actually really matters, and there's some stuff that we need to change. And we've had a lot of examples on that that's kind of already happened as part of Infinite, which has been awesome. It's been great partnering with Brian as he comes in. We talk about all these different things, and then we work with Jesse. Like for instance, I think it was like 2 days ago, we did a big debrief across all these different channels to talk about specific things that were changed because of feedback from players within the community, players within usability. Also then we had the pro team. So it was super awesome to see how that all comes together. And I think the main reason we want to show that is just to show you like where you guys are in the priority, like beyond just from starting with the journey that we made to MCC and then going through there, that through Infinite and what it's doing, like, yeah, players really do have a seat at the table in all of these different aspects.
Do you guys have any maybe just examples or of situations where, like, man, you saw that there was, some talk in the community about something, and whether it took a short time or a longer time, because it always takes longer than we want, regardless, and that includes us, that you kind of feel like, man, I feel like this is kind of a success story of player feedback really impacting the game in some sort of way. And Halo 5 is a recent example. MCC as well.
I think MCC is a really great example. That was just a super fun time too, especially during those early flights. It was kind of this limited group of people who, they had played a ton of MCC. They were signed up. They were there with us having this discussion, and it was great because the team was so engaged and so listening to you guys. We were able to do these flights, collect this feedback. And then I would sit down with the team and kind of go through, and Brian would do kind of the social stuff of checking what kind of beats were coming through that direction. Yep. And I would see what research matched up with that, so we could have this full picture. And it turned into this really tight process where we were kind of, listening to see what you guys were saying and how you adapted to it, and then having these discussions with the designers who, they're so focused on trying to implement everything, and they want to hear what you guys say. But it is hard when there's a lot coming in, and so it takes that time of going down and processing it. And then, I mean, you could see the changes happening to MCC. You could see the designers, and the more that the successful that it becomes, the more that they want it, the more that the design team is really into it, of like, okay, I see how this flows and how we can learn from you guys and adjust the game.
Yeah, I think the other thing that's super key is like as 343 has grown, like we've even looked beyond just even people within internally to go and get experience from outside, right? So a lot of this is like looking at other companies who have done really good jobs at this stuff and then mirroring some of that in terms of bringing that effort in, right? So some of the success stories that we actually have are from people who've like seen stuff succeed in like Ubisoft titles or with Age of Empires and these other ones, and using some of those things to help make sure that that same process comes in as we evolve and build Halo as well.
I think a big key moment that maybe some fans remember was actually a couple years ago. Brian, you had that fireside chat with Bonnie.
That's right.
Can you talk a little bit about like what a moment like that just kind of represents from actual like studio head leadership and coming together with community thought and opinion and sentiment?
I mean, it was huge. In my mind, like we saw that org chart a little while ago where Chris Lee fits. I mean, the reality is it would be all of the fans, and then Bonnie reports to them, right? And we all feed into that. Like that's kind of how we think about it. Like we wouldn't exist, this wouldn't be a franchise without the support of our fans. So I think, as you know, I joined the studio after MCC had already come out. I walked into a studio of people that were, I guess for lack of a better term now, I would just say kind of had PTSD. Like it was, no one really knew what to do about it. It was a big mess. It was a daunting task, but I give a ton of credit. It was because the fans never stopped giving that feedback and sort of pushing the studio to do the best work we could. And Bonnie and the whole leadership team really embraced that and said, we can do better. We've got to do better. This is a huge piece of our legacy here. And it was exciting. I mean, I always joke the easiest part of it all was sitting on stage with a fake fireplace and talking about we're going to fix MCC.
You did it.
Yeah, you're welcome. No, there's been a lot of people have worked really hard to get us where we are, and as you know, like that has now enabled us to get that foundation in a good enough spot. And now the next journey begins, which is bringing it all to PC, which I'm staring at right now. Reach looks absolutely amazing on PC.
It's awesome to be able to sit here and watch it actually being played.
I don't want to count our chickens too early, but it's a success story in a world where, to me, that kicked off a transformation of how the studio is going to be talking to and partnering with our community, listening to their feedback, and having a more open and honest dialogue, which I think has become kind of the new norm across the entire studio now, internally as well, believe it or not.
It does feel like a big culture shift.
Yep.
And I think that's the way that I hear a lot of people talking about it. It's not just a process change, it's an actual culture shift of kind of working together and having that good dialogue back and forth.
So we talked about it a little bit before, but if the question on your mind, and the ideas, but I want to be heard. I want to be listen to me. I've got these like thoughts and opinions. How do they do that? Talk about a little bit like what's going on with Halo Insider right now and kind of looking towards the future.
Well, Brian, you want to start with that?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. First of all, anyone that hasn't already should totally go to haloinsider.com.
Right now.
That's the place you can go and sign up. It's totally free. You can opt in or opt out at any time, but that program is allowing us to build up an enormous database of passionate Halo fans who just want to be a part of making the future of Halo the best it can be. So the first step is just to go there, sign up, and you'll have a whole bunch of fields to fill out that lets us know a little bit more about who are you as a player, what do you like, what do you dislike. If you want to be a part of PC, let us know what kind of specs you have. And then the team uses all that information to now find the right people to play the right alpha beta, which is flighting as we refer to it. But it all starts with the Halo Insider program, and I would really hope that everyone would want to be a part of that, because we want you to help us make Halo as good as it can be.
Yeah, and it's beyond just flighting too. So I mean,
right.
there's other studies that go out. I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with the Halo Community Feedback Program. A couple people. Great. So you can think about
some back there. There we go.
Yeah, there's some. This is like an evolution of that, where now everything is in one place for you. So flighting, MCC stuff, Halo Community Feedback Program, it's now all underneath this umbrella of Halo Insider. So if you want us to know who you are, you got to enlist in this and let us know, because it helps us answer these questions and find you and listen to you.
Well, actually, too, the Halo Insider program, some people in that program were sent surveys to help make this event possible.
Exactly.
Right? So
I was going to say, I totally used it for this.
we did.
And then the other thing I think that is also important is like where the part that we're starting to kind of shore up, and we're showing some of that stuff here, is also how we build that transparency with you guys, so that way you know, as you give us feedback via these sites within Halo Insiders, you'll be able to see, hey, this is where is my feedback at? What are the top issues? Basically, here's where they're basically why we made the decisions, when we're going to be able to see them in flights. All of that stuff is in place. Because the other thing too is, I think one of the biggest questions we get asked is like, well, why did you make the decision, and where is this thing out, right? And we want to build that level of transparency with you, because in order for us to continue to be a positive cycle, you guys have to feel like you're an integral part of the process. So that's
I think it's also important to remember that, like, this is the whole community, and we talked earlier about, like, there's a lot of likes and dislikes and different types of favorite things in the community, and sometimes the hopes and dreams of one community group is diametrically opposed to the hopes and dreams of another one. So if, like, you have a group of people that are like, no radar, never any radar, and then another one is like, yes, I love radar, and radar is the best thing.
That's never happened.
I know. I'm just pulling it out, just as a hypothetical, totally hypothetical.
I love radar.
You know that no matter what decision you make, you are already making, you know, one group happy or one group sad, and that's obviously oversimplifying, but it's important to know that just because the specific thing that you wanted or didn't want in there, if it doesn't go that way, like, it doesn't mean that you aren't being heard just because something isn't actioned upon. And I think that's an important distinction to make.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we could do like a little straw man poll right now, right? That would kind of give you an idea. Who thinks that the best classic Halo game is Halo 2? Raise your hand. Okay. Who thinks that the best classic Halo game is Halo 3?
Yeah, see?
Like, literally,
there,
like,
good job,
there you go,
guys.
right there.
Prove the point.
So a lot of times people will be like, it needs to be classic Halo. Right there, like, there are big differences between Halo 2 and Halo 3.
What about CE?
Yeah,
CE is classic Halo.
Yeah, there we go. We got there. And then even some Halo 4, and we probably even have like one guy back there who's like, man, I just started with Halo 5, so that's my classic Halo game, right?
Yeah, what classic is an interesting part of getting feedback about a game, and we as researchers, we talk about this all the time. A game is different than a movie, right? A game is different than an experience where you consume it. In a game, you're interacting. So when you're getting feedback about a game, it's half the product that you're playing with and the game you're playing, and half of it's you, the kind of person you are, the motivations that you're bringing to that game, the way that you like to play, right? And we can't know that unless we talk to you guys. We need to understand who you are as a player. So games are very different than other kinds of experiences that get feedback. The more we know about you and the more that we understand what you guys like to do and how you like to play, the easier it is for us to put those experiences in the game.
And we're building those tools. Like, we're building those things, like we talk about that, and I think that was the thing that Brian was kind of alluding to, is like us also getting that via the in-game stuff. I think the last thing that I really want to emphasize, that was a really good point, Jeff, is that these games are art, and then a lot of the reason that you like those is because we have some super amazing, talented designers and devs who are back there who also have their vision for what Halo is, and those things that you have all fallen in love with, whether that's Halo 2, Halo 3, Halo CE,